a theory, and it's a goddamn brilliant one, if I do say so myself, that everyone has a collection of metaphorical pictures, one for each mental resource: knowledge, kindness, anxiety, skill, whatever. You could have a knowledge picture the size of a Nebuchadnezzar, which could either refer to the Neo-Babylonian emperor who created the Hanging Gardens, or in this case, a wine bottle comprising 15 liters, and a kindness picture the size of, something small. Who cares? Fuck you, right? But either way, you are constantly reorganizing these resources into 1,000 different cups based on circumstance, or need, or desire. That's why my mother can brew a Kentucky common ale but not really scramble an egg, or why some people say they love their gay children but vote for Ron DeSantis, or why my ex-roommate Valerie used to wash lettuce with Dawn dish soap and had no redeeming skills or qualities whatsoever, or why I consider myself smart, but not smart enough to memorize this speech. On an unrelated note, I've been concerned about politics recently. Look, I don't know how you wake up in the morning, but here's what the experience is like for me, okay? I pick up my phone, I open it, and then immediately I am faced with just the worst headlines ever to hit humanity. And it's been like this, since the spray tan Taliban and the Elon Musk incel Schutzstaffel took over, right? I'm just like, I don't think they can do that. I don't think they can do that either. I don't even know what that means. Retirement homes for penguins? I mean, I get so much information about the stock market every day, and I don't care about the stock market. It's like getting bukkake'd by math. I can't deal with this anymore. Did you know? It's too much. Did you know that they recently figured out who Jack the Ripper is? And, nobody gives a shit. I mean, we spent, as a society, 130 years trying desperately to find closure for the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren of these poor Cockney sex workers. And the second we do, everyone just said, oh man, we've got a lot going on with transgender track and field athletes. People are obsessed with transgender people a lot. I'll give you that. But I also want to say that I remember when I first met a trans person, it was someone I had gone to elementary school with. And then when we went to middle school, all of a sudden he's a guy. And I remember asking someone, what's going on there, right? And they said, oh yeah, his name's Keegan now, and he's a boy. And I thought, well, I didn't know you could do that. And then I spent the next 20 years not thinking about his genitals. Not actually the next 20 years. I'm not that old yet. I forgot how math works. It bukkake's me, right? But some people are just abnormally obsessed. They think that people are being trans specifically for the track and field thing. And I don't think that's true because, as far as I know, being transgender is inconvenient. It takes a lot of time and money. And if someone's willing to do all that, sink thousands of dollars and go to all these doctors who are gross and then get cyberbullied by the president just for the 500-meter relay, then they deserve all the awards. That's all I'm saying. If it were convenient to be trans, we would have all done it at least once. Okay? I would do it, regularly, just to look good in menswear instead of what I actually look like in menswear, which is, a dozen egg yolks in a tennis ball tube. It's all very silly. And, there are two audiences that can hear that joke, right? There's the woke audience, and then there's the non-woke audience that you more often see in, bars, which are the only places where stand-up happens. the woke audience, when I say being trans is inconvenient, they'll be like, preach, queen. And then the unwoke audience in the bar, they'll go, ha! She said trans. Yeah, I don't think we're too woke. Every male comic over the age of 45 is, I think, required by law to make a joke about having a prostate exam, because apparently the worst thing that a straight man can imagine happening to them is, like, being entered. You know what I mean? It's just that, and, like, my wife can't drive jokes, and it's like, maybe she wants to die to get away from you. The only person I know who might be too woke is my dad, right? I once visited him and my mother in Omaha, Nebraska. I've done it a couple more times since, but I want to tell you about this time in particular. And I took their blind Shih Tzu, Basil, for a walk. And alone, you know, in the evening. I was going through downtown because they live in, you know, just deep downtown Omaha, Nebraska. They do have towns there. And as I was passing by the best and onlyest gelato shop in town, this homeless man, like, you know, asks to pet the dog, right? And, you know, the dog wants to be pet. He wants to pet her. Why not, right? You know, he's more eye level than most people she's met on this walk, sitting next to the gelato shop as he is. And as he's doing that, he says, "Oh, is she blind?" And I said, yeah, she's blind. No one likes seeing a blind dog. It sort of confuses them, makes them sad. I mean, another time I was taking that dog for a walk, and it's hard to take that dog for a walk, right? Not because she's blind, but because my mom does it so often, and she does the same route every day that everyone there recognizes my mom. But every once in a while, they'll not recognize me. So then I'll just get these, like, implications that I might have kidnapped my own dog. And they'll ask the dog about it, not me. They'll just lean down and they'll go, "Hi, Basil." Who is this? One time, I took that dog to a coffee shop, and there was a group home that was visiting from some sort of, you know, facility for, like, adults who can't live on their own for whatever reason. And this guy is asked to pet her. So he sits on the floor and he's petting her. He says, you know, he volunteers in the zoo. And then he says, "Is she blind?" And I said, "Yep." And then he started crying. So now I'm the dick in the coffee shop who made this poor man cry. And I said, no, but, like, she likes it. I said, she's fine with it. You know, she's a dog. She just smells stuff. Like, there's nothing for her to see. The whole world is just like a snifferscape of where she might find ham. Where was I? Aside from getting drunk alone in my house. Yeah, so I took the dog to the walk. Homeless man in front of the gelato shop is petting her. He says, "I can fix her." And I said, "I don't think that you can." He said, "Yes, I can. I know Reiki." If you don't know what Reiki is, it's like a type of mystical, magical healing magic where you manipulate the energy around someone. Like, you're massaging their aura in order to, I don't know, realign their soul chakras or something. I don't really know because it's bullshit, right? But he starts trying to do this, and the dog was confused because from her perspective, Reiki healing is just like edging, but for pets. So he's doing this, and he says, she'll wake up in the morning, and she might be very thirsty, but she'll be fixed. And I said, "Okay, great." And then I left, thinking she won't be, but if she is, I will be back here on the street corner tomorrow morning with Anderson Cooper his fucking self, right? Because if you have somehow Reiki healed my dog, then I guarantee you that all the dog owners in the world will chip in to buy you a mansion clinic. Right? So I get home, and then my parents are like, you were gone for a while. What happened? Told them this whole story, right? Do you know what my dad says? He says, you're really supposed to say unhoused now. He heard that whole story. All he got out of it was, you're supposed to say unhoused, Lydia. It's pretty embarrassing. I don't know. I've been wondering recently about a lot of things. Like, how close is the average American in degrees of separation to Adolf Hitler? I wonder if it's more or less than we would imagine. I wonder what the female version of a cockblock is. The only two options I've come up with so far are muff rebuff and pussy and pass-y. I think they're equally good, chime off in the comments, right, which one you prefer. I've been wondering whether drug-sniffing dogs get vacation days and what those look like. Is their version of a vacation just being in an airport but not wearing the do not pet vest? Because wearing the do not pet vest is worse than getting edged regarding pets, I would think. And do they get paid? I can't imagine they do. And if they do, it has to be in something other than money, because I don't think dogs understand capitalism. I wonder how close in degrees of separation the average American is from Adolf Hitler's policies, right? And I know that one is closer than we would hope. In case you haven't noticed, I've been a little bit anxious about politics recently. It's like I'm discovering new mental illnesses every time I think about the world around me. I've started where I can't walk places without music on, because if I don't have music on, I'll just count all of my steps, right? Which I'm sure is not indicative of any deeper problem inside my brain, but I'll just be like 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, I wonder what bird that is. 5, 6, 7, 8. Do titmice live down here? Why do they call them titmice? Oh, fuck, I lost track. 1, 2, 3, right? But then even the music, it brings me back. When the Eagles tell me about their peaceful, easy feeling, I get jealous, because I don't have it. When Jewel asks who will save our souls, I tell her, well, not the fucking electorate, you hippie! And certainly not the swing voters, all of whom live, in this, wonderful world, right? Where nothing matters. I would love to be in that world. Or protest voters, who also live in a wonderful world where, their opinions matter. I would love to live in that world as well. When I'm not listening to music, what I do is I'll play those little video games on your phone, like Tetris or Sudoku, right? But they'll always have ads in the middle, because unlike dogs, humans unfortunately have discovered capitalism. And I always get this ad for something called BitLife, which used to be a computer game I learned recently, but I've only been exposed to it in the phone ads. And it presents me immediately with this problem, right? It says, your wife is pregnant. What will you do? There's 2 options. Keep the baby, give it up for adoption. Now that raises other questions, obviously. Why is it my decision, as the bit husband, presumably, what to do with this bit baby? Why has BitLife not asked my bit wife what she wants to do with this pregnancy? Also, there's no abortion option. Why is that? Was Roe versus Wade overturned in the bit world? How close is the bit world to our own? Where do I live in this bit world? Am I a woman in the bit world? Am I gay in the bit world? Am I gay in real life? all wonderful questions I would love to ask bitlife.china.sexygame.notascam.com, but I've never gotten around to it. I have a lot of people to complain to. I recently complained to the Alabama State Voting Commission about my landlord because he sent an email telling us not to vote for the September 24th, 2024 ad valorem tax increase to fund public schools, saying that if it passed, he would raise our rents, which I personally believe is in violation of Section 17.17 of the Alabama State Code regarding, voter intimidation. It could also be related to a couple of other things, right? A couple of other laws. Complained to them, the Better Business Bureau, the Secretary of State. They all told me to fuck off, basically, and now I've been removed from the voter polls, which I think is just further illegal, because that's retaliation. Can you believe my dad wants me to go to law school? Anyway, I've been concerned about politics since the first election. I mean, back then I really thought, not the first election ever, right? I'm not that old. I'm kind of old. I'm not that old. But the first election I voted in was in 2016. I was 18 years old, and I was a freshman in college. And I remember I lived in Pennsylvania at the time, which felt important because in Pennsylvania, you do matter. They pretended to care what we thought politicians did, since it was a swing state. And I went to the polls really early in the morning because I wanted the sticker to wear to all my classes that day. And it turns out Pennsylvania doesn't even give you fucking stickers. They just give you a receipt. And wasn't that just like the portent of doom for the whole rest of my political life so far? And then I came back to my dorm to get my books for French class. And what do I see but my roommate, Hattie, who, despite her name, is not actually a 17th century village washerwoman, on the top bunk with her boyfriend, Rob, just going at it like animals in a position that I don't think Adam and Eve ever even dreamed of back in the day, if they were real. And they just sort of looked at me and then froze. Kind of like my cat does when I walk in on him shitting. As if I wouldn't notice. But I just knew at the end of the day one of us would be happy and one of us wouldn't, right? Because her boyfriend was the president of Young Americans for Liberty, and that's a libertarian association we had on campus, and it was exclusively populated by white boys because they're the only ones with enough arrogance to assume that, in the Mad Max future they're envisioning, that they'll somehow come out on top. Right? I can just imagine him going after her, going victory thrusts. Right? Lock her up, lock her up, lock her up, lock her up. Oh! So I didn't like that. I also didn't like at the end of the day. I went to bed early because I could see the tides turning. I woke up at 4 a.m., Hattie shaking me awake. She says, "Lydia, whatever happens tonight, I just want you to know that I love you. You're my friend. I'm here for you no matter what." And that was the last time I saw that bitch. She moved out without telling me 4 days later. I don't have a joke about that. I just wanted you to know. There's a lot of things I don't really have a joke about that I want you to know. I want you to know that I know how I come across, right? I had a professor in college who called me over after class to say, "Lydia, you have a visible aura of despondency that radiates to me and everyone around you and consistently makes this class just a little bit worse. Is everything okay? And then I had to say, all good, Randy. Right? When I was, what do you expect me to say to that, Randy? He asked me if he can make me a counseling appointment. I'm not going to have my biblical studies professor call the counseling center for me. I mean, that would be a joke, right? Another time when I was 7, I entered a Halloween costume contest. It was in a parade in the gymnasium. Everyone in our school was in it. I was a jellyfish. I had a clear umbrella, and I taped like curly bubble wrap to it, right? And I walked around like this. And I got second place. You know who got first place? A girl named Kayla, whose costume was me. She went to CVS and bought a pair of reading glasses and a black wig, and then wore what I can only assume is the least matching clothes in her closet, and a pair of leg warmers. We all had that phase. Don't pretend you didn't. I didn't like that shit at all either, right? Another thing I don't like is that my favorite laundromat closed down. I don't know if you have a favorite laundromat, or maybe you're like in the 1% and you have a machine in your house. But now I have to go to my second favorite laundromat, and I don't like that place for a couple reasons. The first one is that when I was walking to the car, a homeless, or rather an unhoused, woman followed me, and she said, "Can you drive me to Panera?" And I said, "Not today," as if, like, a different day, I would totally be down. And then she said, "You're being mean." And was I? I'll never know, right? Another thing that happened there, I walked in, no one else in there. No people, machines were running, but there was no one watching them. It was just me and a baby. Like, hot off the womb baby, sitting in a carrier on one of the folding tables. What do you do there? Right? I mean, I walked over to it. It looked well cared for. It didn't have a collar, so I couldn't check its tags. I debated, like, should I take it to the pediatrician and they'll scan it for a microchip, right? What if it doesn't have it? Is it my baby now? I'm not sure I'm ready for motherhood, as we established during the BitLife story. But as I'm going through all these permutations, what should I do? Oh my God. If the baby just, like, dies, is it my fault? Then the woman comes in and she says, "Ah, thank you for watching her." As if I consented to that. Not that we care if women consent to babies anymore. What I should have done, though, was call 911. But I try to avoid doing that. And talking to cops in general. My neighbors once set their yard on fire. And I was just watching out the window, like, see where that goes. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not gonna involve the fire department if at all necessary. And that's not just because at a stand-up show once, one of the town firefighters called me a stupid cunt. That's part of it, but not entirely. Right? I'm not upset about that. Everyone calls me a stupid cunt in my brain every day, right? My neighbors are stupid, though. They have a Trump flag, so I knew it already. They have a Confederate flag, so I also know that they can't let shit go. But they sometimes park their fucking wank Panzer trucks behind my nice little blue sedan. And then I'll knock on their door, And it's an empty threat because, as we've established, I don't like calling the cops. But after the first couple times of asking them to move their car, I said, if you keep doing this, I'm going to have to, like, call and get your asses towed, right? Because I can't keep going over here and asking you to move your car so I can go somewhere. Like, they're like, oh, we didn't know that you wanted to go somewhere. And it was like, oh, I'm sorry. I should have sent you, like, the minutes for the next month of my life so you know when you can park your car behind mine. And it's like, furthermore, as very if, I am going to ask permission to drive my own car from my undergrad fucking neighbors over there, like I'm going to say, hey, can I please get in my car that I've been driving since before your first nocturnal fucking emission, just so I can go to my friend's house and carve a seasonally inappropriate pumpkin? No. Ridiculous. I don't have to explain myself to people. I don't like explaining my sexuality to people. I'm an asexual person. I think you can understand parts of speech well enough to know what that means, and if you don't, whoops, not gonna explain myself. But I'm an asexual, and the last time I told that to a stranger was at a party, and it was a man who asked me if I had a boyfriend or if I had a girlfriend, and I said no, and I'm not looking for one because I'm asexual. And he says, oh, me too. And I was like, oh my God, that's so crazy, right? Because, you know, you don't meet fellow single-celled organisms out in public very often. So I was like, yeah, you know, and it's, a lot of people don't understand. And he said, no, they don't understand. And I said, you know, like, how long have you known? Like, what's that experience been like for you? And he says, oh, well, I've always sort of, you know, felt that way. And I was like, yeah, you know, because I remember growing up and trying to force myself to be attracted to people unsuccessfully, right? I was like, I'm probably bisexual because that just gives me more opportunity to play the field, right? But no, I'm the opposite of bisexual. I'm non-sexual. And we kept talking, and he was like, yeah, you know, I could have sex, but I wouldn't really care. And I was like, yeah, exactly. Like, it doesn't do much for you. And he was like, no, it doesn't do much for me. I'll leave them the next morning, whatever. And I was like, sure, okay. Yeah, you know, no feelings whatsoever. I don't even like my friends. And I was like, what? And he said, you're my family. If any of them died, I don't think I'd care. I was like, you know what? I'm describing not wanting to fuck people, but you're describing something called being a sociopath. And those are different, right? And he said, I didn't say that to him, I just wanted to, but he was like, you're not going to put this in your comedy routine, right? And then I lied, and I was like, nah, right? My cat's in the corner here. I'm filming this alone in my house because I've tried with an audience in my house, and that's just weird. Not that this isn't. I'm not a big fan of sports. My parents are, though. They're big fans of Kentucky basketball. But I think sports, it's just kind of mean and, you know, boring and just so testosterone driven that I don't really get the draw. My mother told me that Kentucky has a basketball player from Nottingham, England. His name is Amari. And she said that whenever he goes onto the court, the other team just chants, USA! USA! at him. As if he, like, doesn't know where he is. Like, what an insane thing to chant at the British guy playing basketball in Kentucky. Of everyone in that stadium, he's the only one here on purpose. I'm in America because I happen to be shot out of a vagina in America. He had to go through the steps He applied for an American college. He could have gone to an English one and not been poor forever. Well, he's a basketball player. He's not going to be poor forever. It's a bad analogy. Basketball's fine. What I really don't like is football, right? I don't understand the rules. Football to me just looks like a disaster that slowly migrates from like one side to another, right? Like a Ouija board trying to find a letter. And I also think it's racist because, and we don't think about this enough, this is another reason why we aren't woke. Football, if you just narrow it down to brass tacks, is a game where an old fat white man stands at the edge of a field and yells at a bunch of black teenagers to work harder! Move it, move it, move it! Other end of the field! Go, go, go! What the fuck is wrong with you? And speaking of my cat's balls, here he is. He doesn't have any. I had him fixed pretty early. Right? At around 3 months, because of Plato's allegory of the cave. Now, Plato's allegory of the cave, for those of you, if you don't know, congratulations on not having gone to middle school and or being from the state of Alabama. A wonderful place that really cares about education and progress, where 3 years ago I had to vote on whether or not to outlaw slavery in the Constitution. But Plato's allegory of the cave basically is the story of these men in a sex cave, like a sex dungeon cave. And they're all chained together, really kinky-like, and they're staring at a wall, so all they can see is the shadows cast by the fire behind them. To them, this is reality. Right? But if they were to be unchained and turn around and leave the cave and experience the rest that the world has to offer, you can never go back in that cave and be as happy as you were the first time, because now you know something better is waiting for you out there. And that's why I didn't want my cat to have an orgasm before I cut his balls off. I didn't want him to know how good it could be. If I were to go back to that joke that was not a joke about the ad valorem tax increase, I would say that I think I put a lot of effort into stuff and just get very little reward. I'm filming this on my computer right now, and I assumed this would be like a 2-hour fucking magnum opus. It has been 32 minutes. That is not a lot of time. And now I think that all of this grad school stuff, wherein I have done my best to avoid doing the thing I came to grad school for, has funneled down into this half hour on a Saturday night in my house, filmed sitting on my ground while the cat chews my ass. I want to leave you on one last joke. In Alabama, an embryo is a person, according to the state Supreme Court. Now, I don't agree with that. I think it's an unfair rule, because an embryo lives inside a woman, and an embryo is half egg and half man yogurt. What do you call that? Who gives a fuck, right? And you call it murder when an embryo dies, but you're not willing to call it a Holocaust when a man jizzes to his sister into a sock, right? You don't say that. If a woman has all of her eggs in her at birth, and each egg is half a person, that makes a woman legally a Boeing 747 jetliner, with exactly as much control as Boeing does of when passengers are ejected from the premises. Like, it's shameful, really. I know someone recently who found a stray cat, right? And I was like, shit, you're a grandmother, that's crazy. She said, well, no, I'm getting it a spay abort. I was like, a spay abort? What's that? She said, well, if you take the two parts of speech together and, you can figure out what it is. And I was like, yeah, sure, but, I'm filming a stand-up special, Elena, so I would like for you to explain it, just for the bit. And then she said, well, basically, they cut the uterus out of the cat with the fetuses inside, like a big kitten pierogi, right? And then they just throw it away. I thought, it is a little more visceral to think about it with cats than a human baby. And it also makes me think, did you ask your bit cat whether she wants that abortion? Or did you just do it to her? We don't think about the consent of cats when we cut off their bits. We don't think about the consent of dogs when we send them to work for the TSA, which is basically like going to hell. And furthermore, it's really fucking sad that in the state of Alabama, I have fewer reproductive rights than an unhoused cat.